So, one thing that I've begun to realize is that everybody, no matter how agreeable that people can be on certain things, everybody has a different definition as to what the perfect scrambled eggs are. And this might even be a more divisive issue than the current American political divide. I don't know, I just thought that was interesting. Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Michael Wong, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Shenanigans. Well, this has been a very busy week for both news and for sports, so this episode might run a little long. But hey, more time for us to enjoy a little discussion, right? Well, without further ado, why don't we get into it, starting, of course, as always, with the news. This Week in Shenanigans presents the News of the Week. For starters, we have breaking news out of New York. Remember Diddy? Remember how he seemed to be the focus of everything news for months, and then for the last maybe month or so, we just haven't talked about him at all since kind of everything else happened? Well, I was just informed that today, on the day that I'm recording this, Friday, October 3rd, that Diddy was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months in prison for sex trafficking, capping a sordid federal case that featured harrowing testimony and ended in a forceful reckoning of one of the most popular figures in hip-hop. Now, if you've been living under a rock, I'd be happy to give you some context. So basically, Sean Combs, who's better known by his stage name of Diddy, has been a very prominent artist in the hip-hop scene, having been active from 1989 to 2024. During that time, he was known especially for these wild parties that he'd throw and invite pretty much everybody in Hollywood to join him. Well, recently, there have been some things that came to light that behind closed doors at these parties, there were some scandalous and, in many cases, non-consensual activities that happened at said parties. So there was a lot of witness testimonies, obviously nothing pretty at all. I can't get into like the gritty details because that's beyond the scope of this show. But all you need to know is for his crimes, Diddy has been sentenced to 4 months and 2 years. However, since he has been in jail since last year, the judges ruled that he did technically already serve 1 year of that sentence, meaning that he will be released in about 3 years' time. His lawyers argued that he should be released immediately due to the fact that, well, according to them, he already feels remorseful for his actions because a year behind bars was enough. But I don't think they understand that that's how it's supposed to work. There's obviously you want to be remorseful for your actions, but there is still a penalty that needs to be served. The bottom line is, thankfully, the justice system has sent a notorious predator behind bars where he can't harm anyone anymore. Now, moving on, we have some more international news. Recently, the United States government has taken a much harder stance on drug cartels that originate especially in Mexico, but in several other parts of Latin America as well. One such place that drug cartels can operate in, or frequently do operate in, is Venezuela. And according to the Trump administration, there are several fishing boats that frequently ferry drugs into the United States through international waters. A little while back, the administration finally decided to take it a step further and airstrike one of those boats, killing everybody on board. And they haven't stopped. On Friday, United States Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that he ordered another strike on a small boat he accused of carrying drugs in the waters off Venezuela, expanding what the Trump administration has declared as a quote, armed conflict with cartels. In a post on social media, Pete Hegseth asserted that the vessel was trafficking narcotics and those aboard were narco terrorists. He said the strike killed 4 men but offered no details on who they were or what group they belonged to, following the U.S. designation of several Latin American cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Of course, just like anything that the government does, these actions have not been without their critics. For example, Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky has frequently criticized the U.S. strikes in the waters of Venezuela. According to him, striking a boat when you don't know who is on it or what's on it is a terrible policy. Now, let's look at the facts. Is the Trump administration truly indiscriminately bombing these fishing vessels in the Southern Caribbean Sea? Now, obviously, we can't really answer that question for sure, but the fact that they're not telling us exactly which cartel they're part of is a little bit of evidence that does point in that direction. Of course, then again, the government is usually pretty secretive about anything related to military activity, so we can't really say for sure if there really is indiscriminate bombing going on. Obviously, in principle, keeping narcotics out of U.S. borders is good, objectively good. However, the actual methods being used to execute this undertaking is a little more morally ambiguous. So, I don't know. We'll just kind of have to wait and see how this goes because there's really not much we know still about exactly what's going on with this situation. Now, up next, some more updates from the war in the Middle East. Earlier this week, President Donald Trump proposed a peace plan that would bring an end to the war that has been raging for nearly 3 years now. So here's what's up. Basically, Hamas, which is the governing body of Palestine, would have to give up all power, like all military power and authority, and release all 43 Israeli hostages, 20 of whom are still believed to be alive. And in exchange, the U.S. would increase the flow of humanitarian aid. They would help rebuild and potentially pave the way for Palestinian statehood. Now, obviously, this sounds pretty bad for Hamas, but surprisingly, they're willing to accept a few parts of that plan. Most notably, in particular, they are willing to dismantle their authority so long as a legitimate Palestinian state could come into existence. Israel, on the other hand, seems more eager to completely absorb the Gaza Strip into its own territory. Obviously, they've been bombing the place for quite some time, and President Trump has once again told them to stop doing that, although they've shown that they're not really keen on listening to him. Once again, Hamas said they are willing to hand over power over the Gaza Strip to other Palestinians and release the hostages, but some other aspects of President Trump's peace plan are going to require further consultations among Palestinians. Some senior Hamas officials have suggested that there will still be some disagreements regarding on how much of that peace plan to accept, but either way, this is a step in the right direction for at least peace between Hamas and the West. However, as for the relations between the Gaza Strip and Israel itself, that still does remain largely up in the air. Well, that's going to do it for the news of today. Now let's get into a very, very heavy sports segment. It's time for Shenanigan Sports. All right, so once again, news from the MLB postseason continues to dominate the sports world. Since my last episode, the entire wild card round has taken place. Basically, in the wild card round, the third through sixth seeds of each conference, the National League and the American League, face off in a best of three series. Whoever wins gets to move on to the next round, which is the divisional round. So let's recap everything that happened. The Dodgers faced the Cincinnati Reds in their wild card series, which they won with a clean sweep. They won the first two games, which was enough to clinch a trip to the National League Division Series. After that, we saw the Cleveland Guardians face off against the Detroit Tigers. The Detroit Tigers managed to win the series 2-1, and they will move on to the American League Division Series. After that, we got the results from the San Diego Padres facing off the Chicago Cubs. The Chicago Cubs defeated the Padres in the series 2-1. And lastly, a very, very old rivalry, as old as time, frankly. The New York Yankees have defeated the Boston Red Sox 2-1 and will move on to the next round. I especially want to highlight the Yankees-Red Sox series because we have seen the rise of a new young star on the pitcher's mound. Yankees rookie pitcher Cam Schlittler shut out the Yankees in Game 3 of the Wild Card Series. Let me read off his stats for you. He pitched 8 innings, allowing no scores. He only allowed 5 hits and struck out 12 batters. Now, if you don't know baseball that well, that is an incredible stat line for any pitcher. And the fact that this kid is a rookie playing in the postseason speaks volumes. Man, he looks so good against the Red Sox as the Yankees cruise to a 4-0 victory in Game 3. Now, we look forward to seeing what more he can do as the Yankees move on to the next round and face off against the Toronto Blue Jays. So finally, let's talk about what the next round is going to be like. Obviously, I just mentioned that the Yankees will be facing off against the Toronto Blue Jays in the division series. The other American League matchup will be the Detroit Tigers versus the Seattle Mariners. On the other side of the bracket, in the National League, the Los Angeles Dodgers will be facing off against the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Chicago Cubs will be facing off against the Milwaukee Brewers. Now, this is going to be a very, very exciting slate, as each of these teams are now only 11 wins away from capturing the 2025 World Series title. Man, October baseball is so fun, and as the weeks go by, I will continue to be reporting on it every week right here at This Week in Shenanigans. Now that baseball is out of the way, let's talk about some football. I'm not really going to talk so much about the scores this week as I will about the injuries. Once again, it has been a very, very bad week for injuries. Obviously, football is a very violent game, and you're never going to make it through a whole season without any major injuries. But even so, I feel like we've been getting a lot more of them than usual. So, we have 3 new high-profile players who have suffered season-ending injuries this week. So I'm going to talk about all of them. First thing, this isn't exactly new news, but we're going to talk about Arizona Cardinals running back James Conner. About a week and a half ago, he was diagnosed with a foot injury that he apparently suffered in the Cardinals game with the 49ers in week 3, and his season is over. That is a crushing loss to the Cardinals, who don't really have a consistent run game. Next on the list, Malik Neighbors. So picture this. You're a young NFL quarterback, Jackson Dart, who was taken in the first round of the draft and is just now making his first NFL start against one of the tougher teams in the league, the Los Angeles Chargers. So Jackson Dart, the New York Giants quarterback, he put on a great game. He managed to get the win for the heavily um, favored against Giants. However, at what cost? Malik Neighbors, the star wide receiver who was taken in the first round of the 2024 draft, suffered an ACL tear, which is a very, very gruesome injury. He is now expected to miss the entire rest of the season. Now, that's got to be crushing for the Giants, obviously, because he's like the best player on that offense, but also for that rookie quarterback, Jackson Dart, who was playing in his very first NFL start when it happened. Like, imagine being a rookie quarterback. First time you get to, like, actually show the world what you can do. Your wide receiver one gets sent down to the gulag. Man, that's got to be crushing. But you know what's also crushing? Being a veteran who's trying to prove that you still got it and then getting a horrible injury like that. Miami Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill, who was super good in the late 2010s and early 2020s, but has since not really received the same protection as before, tore multiple ligaments in a Monday night game against the New York Jets. And not only was he ruled out of the game after that, he was taken away in an ambulance on all sorts of painkiller drugs. Yeah, like I said, he tore all sorts of ligaments in his leg, including an ACL, and he was forced to undergo season-ending surgery. Now, let me tell you why this is so significant to Mr. Tyreek Hill here. He isn't one of the younger guys in the NFL. In fact, he's getting pretty up there in years. So when you're at this stage in your career and you suffer an injury like that, then that's obviously career threatening. We have no reason to believe that that was the last we ever see of Tyreek Hill. 99% chance, or maybe not 99, like 90% chance that he returns to play football next year. What I will say, though, is that that was probably the last we've ever seen of him as a Miami Dolphin. Leading up to this injury, there had been a lot of tensions growing between Tyreek and the Miami Dolphin organization. But the other thing, too, is that typically when you suffer an injury like that and they have a surgery where like they have to cut open your leg and repair everything, no matter how much you rehab, you're never really the same player after that. And to add the fact that he's getting kind of old to that list, I think that even if a guy named Tyreek Hill will be playing football next year, I think that's the last we've seen of the Tyreek Hill that we all knew and loved. Well, maybe not loved, but that we all felt threatened by whenever we played him in the last few years. But yeah, tragic injury. We don't want to wish these kinds of things on anybody, but hey, that's just part of the game of football. To wrap up our sports segment, I want to talk about a player who played Thursday Night Football. No one expected much of him, and yet he shined. I'm talking about San Francisco 49ers backup quarterback Mac Jones. For some context, Mac Jones was taken 15th overall in the 2021 NFL Draft. He was taken by the Patriots to be the potential successor to the greatest quarterback of all time, Tom Brady. Now, he did pretty good in 2021. He made a Pro Bowl. But after that, he kind of fell off. He did a year with the Jaguars and then eventually made his way to the 49ers as their backup quarterback. Now, no one really expected much of him, but after starting quarterback Brock Purdy got injured, Mac Jones has been forced to start in these last couple games. And he has put on an absolute amazing showing as the 49ers quarterback in these last 3 games. Let me read off his stats to you. Through 3 games in the 2025 season, 905 passing yards, which is 301.7 passing yards per game, and 6 passing touchdowns. That's some pretty elite numbers for any quarterback, let alone a backup. Here's another thing. Mac Jones has started 3 games for the 49ers, like I said, and he has won all 3 of them. Starting quarterback Brock Purdy, on the other hand, has only started 2 games for the 49ers this year and has only won 1 of them. So given Mac Jones' performance, that begs the question, what's the quarterback room in San Francisco going to look like after Brock Purdy comes back from his injury? Are they going to keep playing Brock Purdy as the QB1? Most likely. But there is a strong case for Mac Jones to be their starting quarterback going forward. This guy is playing at a level that we have not seen from him basically ever in his NFL career. And he is thriving in Kyle Shanahan's offense. But yeah, either way, this guy's exciting, and I and so many others look forward to just what exactly he can do in his new role as a 49ers quarterback. Now, this episode's already getting really long. It's about to get even longer. Let's get into our wild card of the week. It's time for wild card of the week. So for today's wildcard segment, I'm going to be talking about the guitar and how it's suddenly super cheap to pick it up. So for most of the guitar's history, it's been pretty expensive, and the reason why is because guitars were usually made of the finest wood, and actually, yeah, that's about it. It's really the wood that really makes or breaks a guitar. If you don't know guitars that well, basically certain woods produce like certain like different sounds, or they reflect sounds differently. So you can't just use any wood to make a guitar, and typically the type of wood that you'd use to make a guitar isn't as common as any other kind of wood, and you need to pay some good money to get it. So for that reason, both acoustic and electric guitars have spent a good chunk of history being super expensive, not really an instrument for the common man to pick up. But in the last decade or so, things have been changing a lot. There's been better access to higher quality wood, and also just an increase in the abilities of guitar producing technologies. So basically, what I'm going to do for you during this segment is show you exactly how a budget guitar can sound almost as good as a fairly expensive guitar. So let's get right into it. What I'm about to show you is a studio quality recording of some notes and chords being played by a guitar that was produced in the 1990s that today I estimate would sell for approximately $500. I don't exactly know what model it is, but I believe Ovation is the manufacturer. Alright, give it a listen. So that's about what you expected, right? The guitar sounds pretty good, in part because, like, again, it's an expensive guitar. Well, not really like the super expensive kind, but fairly expensive guitar, and it was recorded in a studio setting. But I have here with me in the dorm studio a guitar that cost $80 that I picked up at a Black Friday sale. And what I'm going to do is play the exact same thing that the $500 guitar played, like live in the studio, like with my podcasting mic. And what you're going to find is that the overall quality of the music really isn't that different. If you want to assign a number to it, this is a $420 difference in cost, but unless your ears are like super, super dialed into like all things guitar, then I doubt you'll notice a huge difference. So yeah, not that different, right? That was a Mitchell acoustic dreadnought guitar. The market price is about $160, but I got it for $80 as part of a Black Friday sale. Again, not much to say here, but all I'm trying to say is that the difference between a $100 guitar and a $500 guitar is actually pretty far from what you'd expect. I think in the case of acoustic guitars, the real difference maker in terms of sound isn't the guitar itself, although that's not to say it doesn't play a huge role. Obviously, like I kept saying, the type of wood is pretty important, but I think what you really need to pay attention to if you want to make a cheap guitar sound really good is just to get the right kind of strings. For example, I use light bronze D'Addario strings, and that $500 guitar, I believe, had Ernie Ball Earthwood strings. I don't know, I might not remember that correctly, but something along those lines. But yeah, so bottom line, $500 guitar, $100 guitar, not that different. Alright, well, I think that'll about do it for this week. I know this was a longer episode, so thank you very much for tuning in once again. Now, there will not be an episode next week. Some guys from back home are going to pick me up from college, and we're going to go on a little trip to the mountains. I'm looking forward to it, but that does mean no time to record, no time to post, no time to put out content. So, yeah, I'm going to take a little break. I hope y'all enjoy this weekend and the next. So, once again, I'm your host, Michael Wong, and until the next shenanigans.